Have you ever been punished for doing the right thing? Have you ever watched people twist the rules to destroy you, not because you failed, but because you refused to compromise? I know that feeling. I lived it. My name is Daniel, and I'm going to tell you the story of how my integrity put me in a pit of hungry lions, and how the God I refused to stop worshipping shut their mouths and opened the eyes of a king. But this isn't just an old story about survival. By the end, you'll discover 3 secrets about unshakable integrity that can transform how you live when the pressure to compromise feels unbearable. Come, let me take you back to Babylon, to the night I thought would be my last. To understand the lion's den, you must first understand how I came to Babylon. I was perhaps 15 years old when Jerusalem fell. Imagine the smoke rising from the city of David, the temple treasures carried off, the sons of noble families, myself among them, marched across the desert as captives of Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel 1:1-4 records it. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim's reign, the Lord delivered Jerusalem into Nebuchadnezzar's hand. The king ordered his chief official to bring young men from Israel's royal family and nobility. Young men without defect, handsome, showing aptitude for learning, well-informed and qualified to serve in the palace. We were meant to be reprogrammed, given new names, taught the language and literature of Babylon, fed food from the king's table. The goal was simple: erase our identity and make us Babylonians. But I made a decision in those early days that would define the rest of my life. Daniel 1:8. I resolved not to defile myself with the royal food and wine. It wasn't rebellion, it was conviction, and God honored it. He gave me favor with the official, wisdom beyond my peers, and the ability to interpret dreams and visions. Over the decades, I served Nebuchadnezzar. I interpreted his dreams. I watched him go mad and then be restored. I saw Babylon pass from his hands to his successors. I witnessed the night the handwriting appeared on the wall. And I told King Belshazzar that his kingdom was finished. That very night, the Persians conquered Babylon. Belshazzar died, and a new king took the throne. His name was Darius, and under him everything was about to change. When Darius the Mede took control of the Babylonian Empire, he reorganized the government. Daniel 6:1-2 tells us he appointed 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, and I was one of the 3. I was now over 80 years old, an exile, a Hebrew in a Persian court, and yet I was being elevated to oversee 1/3 of the known world. But that wasn't enough for Darius. Daniel 6:3 reveals something remarkable. I so distinguished myself among the administrators and satraps by my exceptional qualities that the king planned to set me over the whole kingdom. Can you imagine the jealousy this provoked? 120 regional governors plus 2 fellow administrators watching an elderly Jewish captive about to leapfrog over all of them. They couldn't stand it, and so they began to plot. Here's the first secret I learned. Excellence creates enemies. When you rise by integrity while others scheme and shortcut, they will eventually conspire against you, not because you've wronged them, but because your character exposes theirs. Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever had people oppose you not for what you did wrong, but for what you did right? Keep watching. Their trap is about to be set. My enemies had a problem. They needed grounds to accuse me, but they couldn't find any. Daniel 6:4 states it plainly. They could find no corruption in me because I was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Think about that for a moment. These were powerful men with resources, informants, and motivation. They investigated my finances. Nothing. They scrutinized my administration. Flawless. They looked for laziness, bribery, any crack in the armor, and found none. This wasn't because I was perfect in some abstract moral sense. It was because I had lived the same way, day after day, decade after decade. Integrity isn't a single heroic act. It's 1,000 small decisions that build a life no one can tear down. But my enemies were clever. Daniel 6:5. They concluded, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." They couldn't attack my work, so they attacked my worship. They approached King Darius with flattery. Daniel 6:7 records their proposal. Let the king issue a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to the king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. 30 days, 1 month, where the only legal prayer in the empire was prayer to Darius himself. And Daniel 6:9, the king signed the decree. He didn't know he was signing my death warrant. He didn't realize that the men praising him were using him. He simply enjoyed the flattery, and with a stroke of his pen made faithfulness to God a capital crime. Ask yourself, what would you do if obedience to God suddenly became illegal, if your daily devotion could cost you your career or your life? That was my reality the moment the decree was published. Now, here is where my story surprises people. When I learned about the decree, Daniel 6:10 tells us exactly what I did. I went home to my upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, I got down on my knees and prayed, giving thanks to my God, just as I had done before. Just as I had done before, I didn't pray more defiantly. I didn't pray less carefully. I didn't hide. I didn't stop. I simply continued the rhythm of faithfulness I had practiced for over 60 years. 3 times a day, I had opened those windows toward the city of God, toward the temple that lay in ruins, toward the promises that still stood. Morning, noon, evening, in good times and bad, under Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, and now Darius. And I wasn't about to stop because powerful men had manipulated a king into signing an unjust law. This teaches the second secret. Consistency in private prepares you for crisis in public. The reason I didn't waver in that moment wasn't sudden courage. It was accumulated habit. I had trained my soul for 60 years. When the test came, my reflexes were already set. If you wait until the crisis to build your spiritual disciplines, it's too late. The lion's den is not where you develop faith. It's where you discover what faith you've already built. My enemies knew my habits. That's why they crafted this trap. Daniel 6:11. They went as a group and found me praying and asking God for help. They had their evidence. Now they had their victim. Picture the throne room, my accusers marching in with righteous indignation. Darius sitting above, unsuspecting. Daniel 6:12. Did you not publish a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during 30 days, except to you, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king confirmed it. The law of the Medes and Persians, irrevocable. Then they dropped the hammer. Daniel 6:13. Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. Watch Darius's response carefully. Daniel 6:14. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue me and made every effort until sundown to save me. The king, who had signed the decree, now desperately tried to undo it. He hadn't meant to trap me. He had been manipulated by men who cared nothing for him, only for destroying me. But my accusers pressed. Daniel 6:15. Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree can be changed. The trap was perfect, a law that couldn't be revoked, a king who couldn't save, and a man of God walking toward the pit. Have you ever been caught in circumstances where no human solution existed, where every door was locked and every ally was powerless? That's where I stood as the sun set on Babylon. Daniel 6:16. So the king gave the order, and they brought me and threw me into the lion's den. Imagine it. The stone rolled away, the stench of death rising from below, the low growls of hungry predators who hadn't been fed, deliberately kept famished for moments exactly like this. The pit was not a cage, it was an execution chamber, a place from which no one returned. But as they lowered me into the darkness, the king spoke words I'll never forget. Daniel 6:16. May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. He didn't say, the God you sometimes worship. He said, the God I served continually. Even Darius had noticed my consistency. Even a pagan king recognized that my faithfulness wasn't occasional. It was who I was. Daniel 6:17. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that my situation might not be changed. sealed by royalty, guarded by soldiers, surrounded by lions. No human escape was possible. Now let me tell you what happened in that pit, and what happened above it. Daniel 6:18 describes the king's night. He returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. The most powerful man in the world lay awake, tormented by what he had done, helpless to undo it. And me, I lay among lions. Imagine the darkness, the sound of massive bodies shifting, the hot breath of predators close enough to touch, every instinct screaming that death was seconds away. But death never came. Daniel 6:22. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. The same God who had been with me in Nebuchadnezzar's court, the same God who had revealed the king's dream, the same God who had protected my friends in the fiery furnace, he had not abandoned me in the den. I didn't sleep peacefully because I was unafraid. I rested because I knew whose hand held my life. The lions were still lions, the danger was still real, but the God who rules over kings also rules over beasts. Here's the third secret. God's deliverance doesn't always remove the danger. Sometimes he joins you in it. I wasn't rescued from the den that night. I was preserved inside it. And that is often how God works. Not by preventing the trial, but by proving himself present within it. Daniel 6:19. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. Imagine Darius running through the palace corridors, the most dignified man in Persia, racing like a desperate father. He reached the pit and called out in an anguished voice. Daniel 6:20. Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Servant of the living God. Even in his anguish, Darius was beginning to understand. The gods of Babylon were stone and gold, but my God was alive, and from the darkness I answered. Daniel 6:21-22. May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed. Daniel 6:23. He gave orders to lift me out of the den, and when I was lifted out, no wound was found on me, because I had trusted in my God. Not a scratch, not a tooth mark, not a single injury. The lions had been hungry, the night had been long, but faith in God had proven stronger than the jaws of death. What happened next reveals God's justice. Daniel 6:24. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused me were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children, and before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. This was not my vengeance. I didn't call for it. It was the king's judgment, executed by the same lions who had been peaceful as lambs beside me. The lions weren't tame, they were restrained. The moment God's purpose was fulfilled, their nature returned. What had been my testimony became their destruction. But the greater transformation happened in Darius himself. Daniel 6:25-27 records his decree to all nations. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, his dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. A pagan king proclaiming to the entire Persian Empire that my God, the God of Israel, is the living God who rescues and saves. One man's faithfulness had become a nation's testimony. And now, centuries later, I can see something I didn't fully understand then. My story was a shadow of a greater deliverance. I was thrown into a pit because of false accusations. Jesus was condemned by false witnesses. I was sealed in a den by a king's authority. Jesus was sealed in a tomb by Roman soldiers. I emerged at dawn, untouched by death. Jesus rose at dawn, having conquered death itself. The angel who shut the lions' mouths pointed forward to the angel who would roll away the stone. And just as Darius proclaimed God's kingdom to all nations after my deliverance, so the resurrection of Jesus has been proclaimed to all nations ever since. My story ended with rescue from death. His story ended with victory over death for everyone who trusts in him. So what did I learn in the den? What can I pass on to you? First, excellence creates enemies, but don't let that stop you. My integrity made powerful men hate me, but the same integrity made me useful to God. Don't dim your faithfulness to avoid opposition. Let your character speak louder than your critics. Second, consistency in private prepares you for crisis in public. The lion's den was not where my faith was built. It was where 60 years of daily prayer proved their worth. Build your habits now. Train your soul in the quiet. When the crisis comes, you'll discover what you've already become. Third, God's presence in the trial is better than escape from it. I spent all night with lions. God didn't remove them. He muzzled them. Sometimes the testimony isn't that you avoided the pit. It's that you came out without a scratch, and everyone knows it wasn't your doing. Fourth, faithfulness outlasts opposition. My accusers are forgotten. Their names aren't even recorded. But my story has been told for 2,500 years. Integrity has a longer legacy than schemes. Keep your window open. Fifth, one life of conviction can change a kingdom. Darius proclaimed the living God because of what he witnessed in me. You never know who is watching your faithfulness or how far your testimony will travel. I was an exile who never saw Jerusalem again. I served pagan kings for over 60 years. I was targeted, accused, and thrown to wild beasts. And yet I would not close my window, not because I wanted to die, but because I had already decided, long before that decree was signed, that some things mattered more than survival. My God was real. My worship was not negotiable. And if faithfulness led to death, then I would die faithful. It turned out that faithfulness led to life, and to a testimony that has outlasted empires. Here's my invitation. What window do you need to keep open? What practice of faithfulness are you tempted to abandon because the pressure is too great? Don't close it. Don't hide. Keep praying. Keep believing. The same God who shut the mouths of lions is still on his throne. If this story stirred something in you, share it with someone facing their own den, someone who needs to know that integrity is never wasted and that God still delivers. And subscribe to this channel to continue the journey through the treasures of God's Word. Every week, we walk through stories of ordinary people who trusted an extraordinary God and discovered He was faithful. I am Daniel. I served the living God in Babylon, and He shut the lions' mouths. May He give you the same courage to keep your window open.